This is like wild.
You'd have to look up the history of if this has ever happened. You'd be human if you didn't have a doubt on if this was corrupt or not.
She was trying to say, I'm just kind of looking for a way out. She's not happy. She didn't think John was happy. They've moved. They've gotten rid of the dog or got rid of phones. Brian Higgins got rid of phones.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
And welcome back to the Pretty Guilty Podcast.
Glad you came back, actually, right?
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming back to join with us. So today we're actually going to talk about a trial that is ongoing. It just started this week with jury selection. It is the second trial. The first one was a hung jury and deemed a mistrial. The prosecution decided to retry the case, and that is the Karen Read trial. We have a situation like this where there's another trial. It seems like between the first and the second trial, there's more information, evidence that gets disseminated into the public. The problem is that this case has been so high profile that it makes it more difficult to find jurors who actually don't know about it, haven't formed an opinion, can really go in unbiased. We are going into this second trial with new information, and then there's also other information that's been excluded that was allowed into the first trial. And do you think that that's always a fair thing?
Judge Bev has her own controversies herself.
Correct.
So I feel as though if Judge Bev wasn't going to allow it in the first, then why would she allow it in the second, or vice versa, either way? And I'm very pro change your mind when, I guess new evidence would be presented, but this isn't new evidence that's being allowed in.
Interesting, though, as you talk about the same judge, we actually have different attorneys, same attorneys, some different attorneys too as well.
Some new counsel.
Right. So on the Commonwealth side, we have a new attorney who was actually part of the Whitey Bulger case previously, which I feel like that's pretty big. And then on the defense side, who did they bring in? This is like wild.
I think I would have to look up the history of if this has ever happened, but a juror from the first trial from the hung jury ended up joining Karen Read's defense team.
Yes. Has just assisted Karen Read, hasn't asked any questions to the jurors because right now they're still in the jury selection process. But we do want to say that it was an alternate juror, and that juror never did deliberate, so they were not part of the verdict of it being a mistrial.
But I do think it's very important to point out that juror is an attorney themselves.
Yes. Yeah, correct. They didn't say, go online.
I know.
Get your Kim Kardashian degree.
Right. A dog washer turned defense member. Yeah. No. An attorney.
That would be so interesting for sure if that were to happen.
Yeah.
Be like,
I mean, honestly, it doesn't make it any more or less interesting that the alternate juror was an attorney, but I think it's important to mention.
But the fact that she so believed that Karen Read was innocent that now she wants to support her by being on her team. How that approach came about is very interesting. What did that conversation sound like?
Yeah.
And who approached who, and how did she get there too as well? But yes, that's a good point to point out that actually she is an attorney. They didn't pull her off the street.
Personally, when I say I don't believe that there needs to be another trial, I feel as though you have to, as a juror, you have to convict somebody without a reasonable doubt. And I feel between the circumstantial evidence, the police corruption, whether you believe it's corrupt or not. I mean, watching in the previous trial, one officer after the other get interrogated. I mean, there's just, you wouldn't be human if you didn't have a doubt on if this was corrupt or not. And just some of the evidence doesn't make any sense. And I just feel as though whether she is guilty of it or not, you're supposed to, as a juror, convict somebody without a reasonable doubt. And I don't believe I would be able to do that.
Because living in a small town,
yeah,
the population of Canton, Massachusetts is like 24,000 people.
Feels like 24 people.
It really does, which I think brings the idea of police corruption to a different level, because when you're in smaller towns, everybody knows everybody.
But you have police corruption layered with everybody just knowing everyone because of a small town. It doesn't make it better if it's just police corruption, but you have just kind of, it stacks up against you really in that sense.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the problem. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everyone's business, which I think it was one of the detectives on the stand, and when he had testified in the first trial, and they like to pretend. Actually, it was Brian Albert. So
Ryan Koberger?
yeah, it's always a Brian. Just kidding.
Never
He's
met a
pretty
Brian
funny.
I like. No, I'm just kidding.
Brian.
Your name is Brian. We're not talking
I
about
know.
you.
Actually, we do have friends that are Brian. They're super nice.
Allegedly.
Yeah, we don't really have friends. So, anyways, at the end of the day, we have to remember that this police officer is a victim. He ended up found dead in the front lawn, kind of more on the street side, in front of Brian Albert's home. And nobody knows who did it. And a lot of finger pointing.
Well, everybody that was gathered at this house is saying that it was Karen Read. And Karen Read is saying that she went home and left John at this house. There's a lot of different theories. We don't have to get into all the theories, but it's essentially all of the police officers against Karen, and Karen saying, I didn't do this.
The concern is, I know we talked about it previously in regard to the Idaho 4 case up in, Idaho with the college students, is that these investigations are not necessarily done as sometimes you would think that they would be. This case really was not. There was so much tainted evidence. The reason they're blaming Karen Read, for those who don't know, is they're saying that they were fighting that night when they left the Waterfall Cafe, possibly prior to leaving. So through the evening, they went to Albert's home, and John O'Keefe actually never went inside. That is what
Allegedly.
The prosecution is saying that John O'Keefe actually never went inside the home. And as Karen Read dropped him off, that she backed into him, hit him, knocked him into the ground. And might we mention, there was a blizzard that day. Mm-hmm. It was cold. It was a blizzard, like a whiteout type. Mm-hmm. They all had been drinking. She was clearly driving drunk at that point. That has been confirmed. So she leaves, goes to John O'Keefe's home, where she stays with him a majority of the time. She still has her own place. So now they're saying that she hit him with her vehicle and killed him. She is saying that when she left him, she did not hit him, and then found him in front of that property just around 6:03 a.m. is, I think, when the approximate
She didn't
time.
find him alone, though. I think that's important to mention.
Correct.
She was not alone when he was found.
Yes, she had called Jennifer McCabe, and she called Carrie Roberts, who were friends, acquaintances, I think, of John O'Keefe, and essentially said he didn't come home. The three of them went looking for him in this blizzard, and then they arrived at Brian Albert's, the Albert home, and then he was in front of the house, called 911.
What were your thoughts on the 911 call?
The 911 call is interesting because you can't really tell or ascertain specifically what is being said in the background. There's a lot of screaming and chaos by Karen Read.
And you can hear her in the background. Just hysterical.
The panic of her in the background is, it's jolting, because you can tell that she's panicked for sure. So that there's not a lot that you can really hear from it. They do say in the phone call, Jennifer McCabe was the one who called 911. In that phone call, she says that they found an unconscious person. And then at one point, she tells the 911 operator, it appears he's dead. And
whispers it.
Yeah.
I thought the whispering was interesting. However, I could maybe understand if Karen is hysterical and maybe she's trying to say to the operator, like, I think he might be dead. And she's not trying to speak loudly. I just thought the whispering was very interesting.
The Bodycam video of the first officer who arrived on scene, Officer Saroff, I believe is how you say his name. And when you watch that during his testimony of the first trial, that is where I think we start to see the fractures in this investigation. And that's what makes me mad, honestly.
Yeah.
Because then I feel like John O'Keefe did not get a fair investigation of who did this.
I personally, watching any of the testimony for any of the officers, detectives, it is just infuriating to watch. All of it is just so infuriating to watch. It doesn't feel like any of these people want justice. They just want to make a point.
So Jennifer McCabe was outside with Carrie Roberts and Karen Read when the body cam video shows when the officer arrived. he's talking to them. And then at one point during testimony, Alan Jackson, Karen Read's defense attorney, does a great job. If you want to see an attorney do a good job on cross-examination, people may not like him. I actually like his style. He goes after, and these officers, he's had the crash expert, he had him stuttering on the stand, and that's not a good look. But nonetheless, the body cam video shows that at one point Jennifer McCabe is outside in front of the Albert home, walks towards the Albert home and into the residence. Mm-hmm. We have a crime scene. There's a crime scene, and they don't block it off.
They don't. And you know, when he's on the stand and they ask, well, don't you think the protocol should have been, this is a crime scene? Well, I didn't know anybody died. They said on the 911 call they believe that he's dead, which certainly the 911 operator relayed to the officers at the scene, arriving to the scene. So yeah, you should block off and secure the scene as a crime scene.
Correct. But you're actually right. When in that cross-examination, Alan Jackson asked him, okay, let me rephrase the question, because he says, I didn't know that it was a homicide. Mm-hmm. He says, well, anytime you arrive at a scene, if it's a crime scene, do you section off? What do you do with these witnesses?
Do you just roll around in the snow?
Yeah. I mean, making snow angels.
But he says, wouldn't you want the witnesses to be separated so you can get everybody's statement? Don't you think it's a problem that the witnesses are cooperating their stories? Don't you think that's problematic? He says no.
He finally admits that he will separate them so they can't collaborate. I was like, okay.
Alan Jackson says to him, now looking back, do you think you should have handled that differently? He says, no.
Let's just say, for instance, if Karen Read is guilty. Okay.
Correct.
The way they did this investigation, either way, hands down. And
that's my whole point.
Right. And if they're
that is my whole point. And there is no need for a second trial. It's you can't convict Karen Read without a shadow of a doubt because the investigation was botchy at best.
So Michael Proctor, dirty. I'm so sorry. It's an opinion. But the way he handled this investigation was improper. They collected evidence and they put them in red Solo cups. They didn't have evidence bags. They didn't steal them.
That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
He had a snowblower.
Right.
Like, I don't even use a snowblower. Like,
we live in Texas. Why would you have a snowblower?
We've lived in snow before. I'm just saying. Is he uses a snowblower to blow the snow to see if he can procure evidence while he's like contaminating evidence, pushing it around. He did get suspended and fired, Michael Proctor did, because he has been known to drink while on the job.
To drink and then get in his cruiser. But I mean, okay, so if he had Solo cups in his car, that's a problem. If they got Solo cups from the house, that's bigger, way bigger. It's just all of it is a problem. Every part of it is a problem.
The last thing I'll say about this part of it too, because I feel like we could go down this rabbit hole forever
on a lifetime.
How poor this investigation was done. Okay, maybe it won't be the last thing I'll say.
I was just about to say, there's no way that's the last thing we're going to say about that.
I forgot.
Okay.
No. So what I wanted to say is that they never investigated the inside of this house.
And that was another thing.
Right.
He's on the stand. Alan Jackson says, do you think you should have investigated the inside of this home? No. Do you wish you had done that? No.
Do you think you should have gone inside and looked for any kind of evidence or clue? Because there's a dead body
on the front lawn.
And not to mention, there's kind of a code, right? I mean, these are all police officers, detectives. Michael Proctor is with the ATF. This is one of your fellow officers. And there is a duty, I would think, to protect them, not like cover up for them, but don't you want to find out who did this? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, yeah, it's shoddy at best. And I think there's the holes in the investigation, whether Karen Read is guilty or she is innocent, what you believe.
And everybody's allowed to have their opinion.
Correct.
We're not saying you have to agree with us. And we're not saying that Karen is innocent. We're fighting for her innocence. Like some people are diehard Karen Read fans. Turtle boy. So we're just saying that at best, this is a shoddy investigation. Right. It feels a bit corrupt. And that's it. it's just not justice for the victim ever. When these type of things happen, the one person who loses the most is the victim and the victim's
Absolutely.
families.
Well, yeah, because so we do want to say John O'Keefe actually was taking care of his niece and nephew. His sister had passed away, unfortunately, of cancer. And a couple months later, her husband had passed away from a heart attack. So he ended up taking the kids and adopting them and raising them as his own, which ultimately we found out through the trial and text messages between Karen Read and Brian Higgins. They had some very flirty exchanges, things were going on. And through those text messages, she talks about how the children, his niece and nephew that John O'Keefe were raising, that they are a problem, that they're coming in between their relationship. And those text messages between Brian Higgins and Karen Read are very interesting because if they were trying to look for a motive, you can't say that wouldn't
Yeah,
trigger something in your mind as far as that goes.
I agree. The camera cut off as we were talking about the love affair between Karen Read and Brian Higgins. So we will resume there.
I'm sorry, I'm getting swatted over here. Looks like Karen Read was kind of confiding in him, almost as if it was a friend, but it was definitely more than that. He asked her at one point, what is it that you want from me? Because she told him message that she thought he was hot. And he said, are you serious? And she's like, yeah, no, definitely serious. So they start talking.
And then he says, it's mutual.
Right. Mutual. And then at one point, she invites him over to her house because she does have a home separate from John O'Keefe. This is not an appropriate friendship when you're in a relationship.
No.
To clarify, Higgins was not. He was single, from my understanding. This all occurred in January of 2022. The text messages between Higgins and Reed is just shortly before the actual incident before his body was found in front of the Albert home. So it was very close to that time frame. And she was kind of looking in her text messages. She was trying to say, hey, I'm just kind of looking for a way out. She's not happy. She didn't think John was happy. And they even talked about, I think at one point, Higgins had asked her, so he's okay with you seeing other people? And she's like, I doubt it. Why would he be? I guess some people do that. And that's up to however you want to have your relationship.
Well, but I think that through it all, we can agree that Karen and John had a tumultuous relationship that was, I would say, toxic, a bit vulgar.
Yeah, that big argument they had in Aruba that was talked about during the trial as well.
Yeah, I mean, just voicemails and just even that night that Correct. John died, she was calling him, leaving him just the most erratic, kind of insane voicemails.
So, I mean, the thing is, we have to look at it at all sides too as well. I don't think that the truth is that Karen looks innocent. Like getting involved with Higgins, and it's not appropriate. And
between her relationship with Higgins not being appropriate and the tumultuous relationship of John and Karen, that alone could seem like reason to kill him.
By who? Which side do you think would be more of a motive for Higgins?
Any of them. You've seen it a million times. I just watched The Craziest 48 Hours yesterday, okay? I've seen it all. People kill for less.
The question is at the end of the day, what did they do to protect John? What did they do to find the person who was responsible for this if none of them were involved? And I think that's where, for me, the doubt comes into play. When we look at the testimony, we look at the evidence that's presented. This is this is not an opinion based off of just hearsay or theory. This is a thought that's based off of evidence that has been, produced in court, testimony, and the lack of this investigation. Like, what did they do for him? If you were not involved in this, where were you to be the advocate? Because you guys are police officers, you're detectives, you're with the alcohol, firearm, and tobacco, you're homicide detectives.
If they did frame Karen, they did a poor job at it. With all the resources they have, They could have done better.
Right. The photos of his injury. So they say when she hit him with the vehicle that he had, of course, we do have to preface this by saying the death was ruled as undetermined. Mm-hmm. So we don't even have an actual cause of death, right? What are your thoughts when you see the photo of his injury?
So to understand to understand how they're saying that Karen killed John was she reversed into him, correct?
Right.
It wasn't she drove up, saw him, and hit him at 80 miles an hour. They're saying that she reversed into him,
Correct.
hit him, and then he died. The photos of his injuries include scrapes on his arms, bruises on his eyes.
Scrapes. Those are gouges.
Yeah.
The defense proposes that they were dog bites, as if it were a dog attack from John Albert did have a German Shepherd named Chloe that he got rid of 4 months after the incident, and along with his cell phone. And Higgins also got rid of his cell phone too, and data on their cell phone.
And there was also blunt force trauma to his head as well, which some could say could be from the impact of a fall, you know, if he was hit at a high speed. And I remember watching in the last trial them talk about how because she didn't drive into him, she reversed into him. I remember them saying, how fast could she really have gone to hit him to cause that much damage?
You know, we talk about the improper investigation and how it was completed. We just hope that in the future that these cops will just do better. The detectives will do better because the victims deserve it, especially O'Keefe's niece and nephew who've been through just a lot between losing their mom and losing their dad and now losing their uncle who essentially was their father. There's so many other victims that are affected by it. So I think that's why we get so hard on it, because it's not just about, they're really just trying to protect themselves too at the same time. So it is what it is, but let's promote doing better investigations.
Yeah, and then let's talk about the third party culprit.
The third party culprit. So third party culprit is going to be part of the defense, since they're saying that, you know, Karen Read is innocent and that's what they're purporting. Then they're going to bring in other suspects that they're saying are actually responsible for committing the crime and murdering John O'Keefe. Those are Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, and Colin Albert. Now, Colin Albert is Brian Albert's nephew. He was 17 at the time that this occurred, but the judge has actually excluded it. The judge has allowed the defense to bring in the third-party culprit evidence for Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, but not. They're saying, the court is saying essentially there's not enough evidence to bring against Colin. And the court is also saying that there's actual very narrow evidence regarding Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, but at the same time is still going to allow it after opening arguments.
I think it
not
should
during.
be allowed. I think that there is questions there. And also they didn't investigate that home to see what evidence was inside of it. And I believe that if we were able to do a thorough investigation, that could have shown something. It would be interesting.
Correct. They've moved. They've gotten rid of the dog. They've rehomed Chloe. Brian Albert got rid of phones. Brian Higgins got rid of phones. There's a lot of suspicious activity.
Say the dog, right? Oh, it was misbehaving. Some people, they do rehome animals. But the phones, both Brian's getting rid of the phones.
The house.
Yeah. I mean, and the basement was a big talking point for a lot of people with the theories and stuff, which we're not going to get into. But if I was going to get into some things, the house being investigated would be interesting. Predominantly the basement would be very interesting. Right. But
although Chloe, the German Shepherd, actually, they were saying, you know, Brian Albert had testified that they rehomed her because she had actually attacked 2 women and injured them. And so they rehomed after that because she attacked. So
do we have record of that?
It was a testimony. I don't know what evidence that they provided in the trial, but it was something that he had testified to. So
I would love, did the women testify that this happened?
No, I don't think so.
I guess maybe it wouldn't be allowed in. But that would be interesting in this trial to see if they're going to do the third party culprit. I was thinking conspiracy. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word.
Same thing.
If they're going to do the third party culprit, if they're going to really bring proof. If they're going to really bring proof that did happen, I find that very interesting.
Correct. But I mean, at the end of the day, the problem with that is, okay, so this dog attacked 2 women. So your dog is vicious, does attack people, which then goes to support the defense that John O'Keefe was attacked by the dog. Correct. I mean, the pictures of the arm of his arm, I mean, it's pretty gruesome, and it looks like, as investigators, we know, I mean, I've done so many investigations of, accidents,
Dog
dog
bites.
bites. I mean, we've done actually a couple. Anyway, we won't go into everything, but we've done enough investigations. And when you see these photos, it looks like there is something that could be from a dog. And so I look at that and I'm thinking, and your dog is attacking people. It does bolster the defense's argument of the fact that this was not necessarily Karen Read hitting him with a car. So I don't know. It'll be interesting.
I agree. So, the last thing we want to touch on really quick is the jury selection.
Correct.
I find it very interesting that so many people are forthcoming about their bias towards the case, whether it's guilty or not guilty. We had on the first day 91 potential jurors, 78 of them said they heard about the case, 40 of them said that they had an opinion, 16 of them said they were biased one way or the other.
But do you know how many jurors actually lie? We should say potential jurors, because there's only 7 that have been selected as of day 3.
We look at jurors from cases back in the 90s, like Scott Peterson. Sorry, I couldn't think of his name. Scott Peterson, you have these jurors who come out and they say, no, we just really wanted to nail him to the wall. There are jurors that genuinely they lie because they want their opinion let in, and that's how you get a hung jury, or that's how you get a wrongful conviction. Sometimes, not always, because people have just gone in, they formed their opinion, and they're ready to just
nail them to the wall.
Absolutely.
Or jurors will lie to get out of jury duty, because most people don't want jury duty. Like you and me, we want jury duty, but nobody else wants jury duty but us.
Take me off the bench, coach. Unless it's something like a speeding ticket, then put me back on the bench, coach. But something like this, put me in. It's very intense. You're locked away from the world for a long time. I mean, not locked away from the world, but and then if your information gets leaked by who knows who, it can be a really ugly side of it. But I find
there's stalking, there's harassing.
But if you're genuinely someone who wants to go into it and have a fully just form an opinion off of the evidence, those are the people that deserve to be on a jury. And
I mean, that's the thing, is I think it's so important to go in unbiased, wholeheartedly, for everybody, every party involved. But I think as an investigator, we're used to that. I have to, when a case is started and we look at the evidence and we take a client on, everything has to be looked at in an unbiased manner. Otherwise, we're not doing our client justice. And so one of the things that you do at the begin is you have to put that thought process of, do I think this person's guilty or not, of whatever it is we're investigating. You have to put that to the side, and we're going to gather the facts. We want to gather the evidence, because our clients deserve the truth. That's why they've hired us. They are seeking the truth. They want information, and we're going to give it to them, as long as we're not participating in any stalking for them. We don't do stalking or things of that manner. But at the end of the day, it's so important to have an unbiased going into these cases too, as well. So I do think we'd make good jurors.
I think so too. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'd hire you for my jury. Well, I don't hire you. You just get seated.
Jurors getting hired. Wouldn't be the first time.
Juror for hire.
Yeah, right.
That's a whole other podcast, right?
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to do more updates on the Karen Read case trial.
If you guys have any questions, I'm sorry to interrupt you guys.
Yeah, no, we're going to do updates on the Karen Read trial as it unfolds. If you guys have questions,
please send them in to us. We'd love to
comment down below. Yeah. You can always email us, DM us your questions. We'd love to have a really open, honest conversation.
Right. And not necessarily opinions that agree with ours. I think we're just open to discussion. I think it's important to do that as well. We say that every podcast, but it's just like, we like to drive that point home.
Well, I'd like if someone has a good point to make. Oh, I didn't realize, or oh, I want to look into that, or
maybe there's a side that somebody hasn't thought of, and again, this is a case where you have information from the first trial, the second trial, that is different information, which we'll talk about more in another podcast. But it's the timeline of, which is very, very interesting, and I think is worth a deeper dive into. But it's the timeline of the events of the phone calls and the last time that John O'Keefe's phone actually registered before it was officially not necessarily turned off, but the side button was pushed.
Yeah.
It was like at 12:32 approximate a.m. Karen Read, their home is like 7 minutes away. Her phone connected to his Wi-Fi at 12:36. It was not enough. I'm sorry, it was not enough time for her to get home. So that's very interesting. But then my thought process is, at what distance from the house does the Wi-Fi pick up?
Yeah.
So it's like, so anyway, we want to take a deep dive maybe into that a little bit too as well, the timeline of stuff. So
absolutely. We have so much that we could
so much to talk about.
Oh, it's like there's
You're
not
like
enough
3 hours.
time. Absolutely. So, all right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Definitely make sure you subscribe to our podcast. We appreciate all the support. We're having so much fun with these podcast episodes. It has been a dumpster fire trying to get this podcast up and running, but we're out here.
I just want to say, anybody who's going to start a podcast, I encourage you, just do it. You're going to run into bumps, bruises, things are going to break, episodes get deleted. You've got to read. You get cats in the mix.
Yeah, but it's so much fun.
Honestly, it's perseverance. So we're glad you made it through it with us for another one, and we'll be here on the flip side.
See you guys next time.
We'll
have a great, beautiful week. Have a blessed week, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Goodbye.
Bye.